we don't have an absolute stranger as such. All of you are, by and large, familiar with the whole issue of Tibet. So then it makes it easier that I don't have to start by saying Tibet is somewhere there and it's China occupied, and I don't have to start from that basic facts.
Second level.
So some of the issues that are going on now, perhaps I could take a little deeper into those issues to further familiarize why I am here and what I'm doing. Just to start with, I started this Europe tour from Italy. There is an organization called Association of Human Rights and Tolerance, this organization. They have an annual program where they give awards to a number of people who work in human rights, and I was invited for that. And since I'm already here in Europe, I took the advantage of being here and then getting myself invited to some of the countries to speak about Tibet. And I've been, for the past 24 days, I've been traveling to from Italy to Sweden, and then Austria, then to France, and then here tomorrow I am going to Hungary, and then finally I go back from Vienna on the 15th. So I should be completing about 25-26 days of travel within Europe. So I'm speaking in so many different countries, different places, universities, groups of people, Tibetans, like that. Today, when we talk about Tibet, number of Tibet supporters or even Tibetans find difficulty in language to speak about Tibet and show the gravity of the problem. Because there in Tibet, how the occupation remains, firstly, apparently all around the world, the media is not speaking about Tibet. Unlike some other freedom struggles or struggles for democracy, where they get immediate media attention by using violence, that's not what the Tibetans are doing. Nor is the Tibetan struggle sponsored or supported by any major corporation or country as such. So Tibet is no, it's untouchable. Now even Václav Havel's country is saying that Tibet is a part of China and is trying to disassociate the people and the government and various other businesses from Tibet. Recently, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was invited by Norwegian Nobel Committee, the Norwegian government itself did not want to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it has come to such a situation. So we are now trying to understand why. Why is it happening? What has happened to the conscience of the European people who were so very close to the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan religion and the culture? Europe used to say that Tibet is a part of China. That's it. Now, many of the European countries are trading with China. They are benefiting from China trade. And some of these corporate companies who are benefiting from trade with China are now moving the hands and the lips of these presidents and the prime ministers, that even though people have sympathy and support for Tibet, the governments have already made the decision. And therefore, when individuals come out and show the Tibet flag, the government sent a message to say that this is not our policy and you may be in trouble if you continue to stand for Tibet. So it has come to such a situation. Instead of receiving any support from European Union nations and also from America, Canada, Australia, instead of receiving any support to the Tibetans, to His Holiness, today there is a threat that we and our struggle is facing dangers. Your government is today a threat to our struggle. Because, number of businesses in Europe are benefiting from China trade. And we need to understand why. What is the trade? What is something that the international community is benefiting from China, which they are choosing against the Dalai Lama's vision of peace and the Tibetan culture and the religion that has always been so very close to the European people? What are they choosing and what are they leaving behind? And as some of you said, you came here because you have appreciation, you have liking of the Buddhist culture. And if you have that, why is your government unable to understand that? Why is your government not able to understand the people's appreciation? If we remain at this level, perhaps it's understandable. But the situation has gone worse to such a level that people are unable to now articulate, people are unable to understand, and therefore there is no words to this. When Tibetans are facing today the Chinese police, immediately around Tibetan homes, houses, monasteries in Tibet, there is also the military. There is the huge Chinese population who now are competing with local Tibetans in Tibet for market, for space, for language, for culture, for survival. So Chinese population in Tibet are already a danger for the Tibetans. So number of other factors are coming together, which is causing a threat to the survival of Tibetan as people and the Tibetan nation. Over that comes in the market. The market, the Chinese number of companies and the government is giving such kind of subsidy and welcoming Chinese investments in Tibet. So, someone like Tashi or Sonam, who I met yesterday, they know their parents, their families live in Tibet. Just to survive as a Tibetan with their identity in itself is a danger. You don't have to say free Tibet. Or you don't have to protest, go out in the street protest. Just being Tibetan in Tibet in itself is a danger. Structurally, the Chinese businesses, the language of the administration, of the media, everywhere it is now trying to integrate the Tibetans into the larger Chinese community. And if you do not continue to be Tibetan, if you do not protest, if you look the other way and become and integrate Chinese, then there's no problem. Similarly, in China also. In China, if you do not fight for rights, if you bow down your head, if you compromise, if you become one of the obedient Chinese citizens in your economy, in your politics, there's no problem. But as human beings, there are basic rights that people want to achieve, people want to enjoy, and without which life makes no meaning. So this is the situation. This is how it's being continuing. Please come. Please come.
Sorry, we are late.
It's okay. Please come. Are there other people coming? There's more space here.
essential needs.
Okay, so let me continue. So the dangers that are now posed to the Tibetans living there, on top of that, are the number of mining companies. Number of these mining companies are individually owned. Is that a translation problem? Oh, okay. So a number of these mining companies are individually owned. Some of them are run by Chinese, and they are given the right to mine in Tibet. Recently, I've seen one of the reports saying that China plans to flatten 700 mountains all over China, and most of them are in Tibet. So with that plan of exploiting natural resources, now there is a threat of the Tibetans. Can we shut the door? Yeah, can we shut the door? Okay. Door.
No ale musíš dát tohle, já jsem slyšel úplně přesně jeho nejmenšího.
Když už tady máme takového schopného tlumočníka, jsme
tlumočení, tak
jo, skvělý.
you can do translation, but it'll take time. But there are some people
You don't understand?
I understand, but I didn't hear you because he translated something and I didn't hear from you, so
Okay.
I don't have to remember.
Yeah, so let me just go on.
Yeah.
We will do that later. Then, okay. And so I'm now talking about mining. Some of the people who follow communism or former communists, whether they are in India or the traditional Chinese defense of what is called liberation of Tibet, or there may be some here, including your president. They say that Tibet has been liberated, and it used to be a feudal society. And therefore, the situation in Tibet is better. If Tibet had been liberated, then Chinese must go back to their own country. Why are they continuing to live in Tibet and exploit the natural resources? So the whole idea of Chinese occupation of Tibet is to take advantage of the natural resources, the rich natural resources. Today when we are talking about Tibet, we are talking about 2.5 million square kilometers of land, which has a population of about 6 million. Czech Republic, which is a small country in Europe, has a population of a little more than 10 million. And the 6 million population of Tibet is the inhabitant of 2.5 million square kilometers, which is 1/6 of China's total landmass. So that kind of topography is what China is hosting today under their own occupation. And if they can suppress the Tibetan population, they get free natural resources. And China, they themselves have said that the biggest and the best quality of lithium and copper and gold come from Tibet. Now, lithium is the one that goes into most of the made in China batteries. It used to be alkaline, now it's lithium ion batteries. So all the batteries that come from China, most of them come from Tibet. So there is huge mining happening all across Tibet. And when Tibetans go out and protest, they are arrested, they are beaten up, they are jailed, and even shot. shot to death. And these protesters are called separatists, terrorists. So the whole idea of Chinese occupation of Tibet is actually the continuation of earlier what is called the European imperialist colonization of Africa and Asia. So what used to be the imperialist colonization is what is exactly happening in Tibet today. They have occupied the country and taken the natural resources for free and suppressing the population. And this is the natural resource that goes into production of cheap made in China products. And here, I have to show you the bigger picture. When China is doing this in Tibet, it's not Tibet alone. There is East Turkestan, which is almost about 1.8 million square kilometers of land. There is the southern Mongolia, which is about 1.6 million square kilometers of land. So out of 8.6 million square kilometers of land of China, southern Mongolia, East Turkestan and Tibet, if we actually cut it, China is left only with 55% of land mass. So 45% of China's land mass is actually occupied country. And if you can suppress the native people in these countries, you can mine oil, natural gas, uranium, lithium, chromite, bauxite, gold and copper. And this is exactly what is happening in Tibet and these occupied countries. And they go into China and the cheap made in China production is happening, and China has flooded the world with cheap made in China products. A number of countries in Europe, America and many of the other countries, now they do not want to produce these stuff in their own countries because it is polluting the air, the water, and having to work in hazardous chemical and gas environments. So that Europe and America can have clean environment and production can happen in China, and Chinese people are having to work in that hazardous situation, and the natural resources can come from Tibet and China and East Turkestan and southern Mongolia, so that European people can continue to be fair and clean. And this is how we are related today. I have been unapologetically speaking in Italy, in Sweden, in France, earlier in Austria, now here in Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. I couldn't go to other republics, but I will be going to Hungary. In all these countries, I've been unapologetically telling European people that your money, your whatever called happiness, is causing the pain and suffering in my country. Our people are dying while you are benefiting from it. And your government will not speak about it because your government are sponsored by companies who trade in China. Your media will not talk about it because much of the media is your government's, and some of the media are corporate companies, and they themselves are trading in China. Unfortunately, people around the world do not know how Tibet is dying. So Tibet is facing not only China, its aggression, its consumerist market economy, its police, its military, its law. Tibet is weighed down under the tremendous global trade. So how do the Tibetans speak about it? There's no language to talk about it. And most of the West, they just say, oh, Tibetans are nice, good people. And Dalai Lama is smiling all the time. So behind that smile of the Dalai Lama is this pain and the suffering. This is the unspeakable, unimaginable weight that is slowly killing. the Tibetan people. There is a fear because the Chinese are trying to settle down Tibetan nomads and farmers into ghettos. Because the nomads, they herd yaks and sheep, and they need huge pasture land to graze their animals. And this is how traditionally, for thousands of years, Tibetans have always lived freely. Now China doesn't want the Tibetans to use these pasture land. They want Tibetans to sell their animals and settle down in small houses, in small artificial villages, so that these pasture lands can be dug up and mined. They need more resources. And when Tibetans protest, they are killed. Recently, just the previous month, in Chamdo, for example, they were mining. They were mining copper. And at the protest site, at the mining site, there was a protest. And one young Tibetan, he was running away from that. And when the police chased him, he stabbed himself with a knife. He said, I will better take my own life than being arrested and being tortured by China. He stabbed himself to death, and then he jumped from top of a building. He made sure that he's actually dead. So, what India and a number of Asian countries and Africa now celebrate as post-colonial era is continuing. Colonial era is continuing in Tibet and in China. And the most inspiring thing out of all this, international trade and the suffering of the people, the most inspiring, the only ray of hope in here is the Tibetans' resilience in maintaining a non-violent culture of struggle. The Tibetans said, we will die, but we will not take other people's life. We will suffer, but we will not cause harm on others. And therefore, number of Tibetans have burnt themselves, set themselves on fire. And when someone has been driven to this, the last method of survival, the survival says that I am dying, but my country will live. My body will burn and be in ashes, but my culture will live. I do not have the freedom today, but my people will live in hope tomorrow. And instead of fighting back with anger and hatred, Tibetans say, I want to speak into your conscience. If you do not believe in my words, if you do not believe in our politics, if you do not believe in our culture and identity, then believe in my death. The sincerity with which I burn myself, when I burn myself, when you see the photographs, I will tell you the truth that I'm trying to say, that I'm trying to show to you. So these 130 cases of self-immolations are a gesture by these Tibetans to speak into the conscience of the Chinese people and say to them, if you do not see the pain and the suffering in the Tibetans, then see it in the colors of the flames that is consuming me. And let that fire rekindle at least some sense of sensitivity in you, some sense of humanity in you. But it's so very tiring trying to communicate this such high level of non-violent thinking and action to the Chinese. It's not because they are not just ordinary Chinese, but these are the Chinese population who have been ruled over and run by politics that has been continuing for all these 60, 70 years of communism. And it has brainwashed the people in such a way that they forget about Tibetans. They are themselves unable to think beyond a situation that they are already living in. They have been captured and controlled by their own language, that they are unable to read and understand anything other than their own language. They are prisoners of their own language. And the Chinese government not only playing the prison of language, even using the most sophisticated technology on the internet to make sure that no such elements called freedom and democracy gets into the mind of the Chinese people. They make sure that people do not have such imagination of freedom and democracy. This is how the government tries to deprive the people and threaten to them that if you have ideas of freedom and democracy, there will be chaos, there will be instability. And they keep on showing examples of America and examples of India. Wherever there are any major problems, they show to them in order to frighten their own people and say that this is the chaos which will prevail in China. We need stability, we need obedience of the people, and we need to have all the Chinese people to be united in this effort to maintain this sense of stability. And they say that when Tibetans protest, when Uyghur people protest, when Mongolians protest, these are separatists, these are terrorists. This is the way how Chinese government has been maintaining control of their own people. And people are therefore unable to understand how Tibetans give their lives in this way. Because they've been told that Tibetans are grateful to China. They keep on messaging in China that Tibetans are grateful to the Chinese people for the liberation the Chinese government has brought into Tibet. That the Tibetans have been liberated from what is called the feudal society, from the Dalai Lama's control of a monarchic monks' government. So a perception has been created in the mind of the Chinese that Tibetans are grateful to the Chinese people. So in fact, the Chinese people feel good when they go to Tibet and set up a shop, and they think they are doing a huge favor to the Tibetans by setting up this shop, which will be part of the machinery in producing money. I've once heard about this completely ridiculous idea where a Chinese prostitute in Tibet thinks that she is helping Tibetans to circulate the money. Because she's been told that Tibetans do not spend money, they save money in form of gold and keep it. So she thinks that she's actually helping Tibetans to circulate their money, and she's there to generate a vigorous economy. So such ideas, this is how the government of China has been maintaining, divide and rule. How they divide the larger population of China and what is called the minorities. Today, while being here in Prague, I was able to visit a museum which was showcasing some of the photographs of a Chinese woman artist, Liu Xia. And now Liu Xia is herself an artist, a photography artist, and she uses photography, creative forms of photography in order to express larger, deeper philosophical state of minds. And also because she's been under house arrest for a long time. She is the wife of China's Nobel Prize winner Liu Xiaobo. There, Liu Xiaobo is saying the control is such that today we speak in gestures. There's no other language possible, that we speak only in gestures. So this is the country which came about with a promise of equality and justice, democracy and freedom. This is the promise Mao Zedong made to all his people. Mao Zedong said, I am the son of a farmer, and we will have freedom, a sense of justice for all of us. From today onwards, starting from the chairman right to the last population of China, there is no rank, there is no class, there is no wealth building. But today, China has ended up becoming the most predative capitalistic country. More capitalistic than what is usually considered America as the monster of capitalism. But this capitalistic country in China is being run in the name of communism. So this is the situation here. I have to speak about China because the whole problem of Tibet had happened because of China. Otherwise, Tibet was such a, what we usually say, a simpleton. Tibet didn't know anything about the world politics. Tibet was so ignorant and isolated that when your country was being invaded, beaten, torn apart, cut, invaded again by Germans and then Russians, we didn't know anything. Tibet was in isolation, did not know anything about the First World War, Second World War. Even in 1945, when the United Nations organization was being formed, Tibet said, we don't want to take part in it. We have done nothing to the world. They said, we always remained neutral and we want to live in our own mountains. That was the state of being of Tibet. We were just nomads, farmers, monks, nuns and traders. And we had hardly any relationship with even our neighboring countries also. Mongolians and Tibetans have always been together, sharing our meat and samba. And Chinese in the east, and Nepalese and Indians to the south. We hardly had any political relationship. Even to the point that during the Second World War, when the United States fighter jet crash landed in Tibet, the Tibetan government issued a warning against the United States and said, how dare you throw your dirt in our country? That was the level of ignorance and isolation Tibet remained. And today it has come to this level that we are having to undergo this struggle. But as I was saying earlier, the only saving grace in here is that what we have always called as our identity, our culture, the true wealth of Tibet is not the mountains, is not the gold, is not anything else. The true wealth of Tibetans is our culture. The culture that is based on love and compassion. And today we know that what we have always treasured as our prized possession, our culture, is coming to save us. So that at least we are not angry, at least we are not driven with hatred, and this is the one that is giving us the hope, and this is the one that is sustaining the struggle. Otherwise, it is almost impossible for a 6 million Tibetan population to survive at this level. And instead of Tibet as a country and Tibetan people as a small population under this weight of China and global trade, instead of it dying or degenerating. The most hopeful thing of all this is that Tibetan culture is most alive today. And Tibetan people are most educated and aware today. And Tibetan people are most united today. Unlike the past 400 years, Tibetans are the most powerful at this moment today. We have never been so united like this. We have never been so politically aware like this. Even in our own practice of religion and culture, I think that the practice of Tibetan religion and culture is sharpest and it is the most meaningful today because we have been tested. We have been tested, and in fact, some of the Tibetan lamas say, and I believe in them, they said that the power of love and compassion that we have, even China and global trade is not enough to stand with us. If you get what I'm trying to say. The power of love and compassion that the Tibetans can practice and bring it to the highest potential, the adversity that we have in the form of China as a country and the global trade as part of the adversity is nothing. And His Holiness has at one point of time said that we deservedly have China as our adversary. And said this has given us the true meaning of love and compassion. So the struggle will continue. There were a number of times when struggles were in exile. Czech people, Hungarians, Polish people, number of them had to go into exile to seek support from outside. While the main population remaining in their own countries maintained the real strength of the struggle. And this is happening in Tibet today. While we go out and seek support from outside and make sense of the struggle to other people, the main population of Tibet are there inside Tibet and they are daily facing the situation. And it must be sometimes terribly difficult when you see your father dying and when you draw your sword and not willing to kill the Chinese. In one such very, very deeply moved emotion, I once wrote this poem. The poem says, the poem is titled Betrayal. Here I'm saying, my father died defending our home, our village, our country. I too wanted to fight, but we are Buddhist. People say we should be peaceful and non-violent. So I forgave my enemy. But sometimes I feel I betrayed my father. So this sense continues within the Tibetan community. There was also this moment when America led this global campaign called Global War on Terrorism. At that time, a number of other countries also started to say, oh, we also have some terrorists and we want to kill them. So internationally, any action, any sign of protest is seen as acts of terrorism. And China said, oh, we have some terrorists in Tibet and East Turkestan and we want to kill them. And we want to join the global war on terrorism. Ridiculous. And this is a poem that I wrote as a response against George Bush's global war on terrorism. And I'm saying, I'm a terrorist. So the poem says, I'm a terrorist, I like to kill. I have horns, 2 fangs, and a dragonfly tail. Chased away from my home, hiding from fear, saving my life, doors slammed in my face, justice constantly denied, patience is tested on television, battered in front of the silent majority, pushed against that wall, from dead end I have returned. I am the humiliation you gulped down with flattened nose. I am the shame you buried in darkness. I am a terrorist. Shoot me down. Cowardice and fear I left behind in the valley among the muley cats and lapping dogs. I am a single. I have nothing to lose. I am a bullet I do not think. From the tin shell I leap for that thrilling 2-second life and die with the dead. I am the life you left behind. Very often, being the activist, people think this is a kind of an odd thing to do, dangerous, and sometimes even preposterous. But being the activist, for me personally, has always been my practice of Buddhism. Because this activism, for me, is the constant search for truth. A truthful living, a truthful meaning of life, a life that is not just for my food, my life, my family, my money, my whatever, that this extends beyond to somebody else, to others. And being born into a Tibetan family in exile, it came very early in my life that there is meaning in fighting for freedom of a country. My parents were road construction laborers. They were working in the higher mountains of Himalayas in Himachal Pradesh, and because they came from Tibet, most of the Tibetans, because they were uneducated, because they couldn't do much in India, and India anyway was a new country for them. Most of the Tibetans earlier, they were road construction laborers. And towards the end of that road construction labor phase, I was born in a tent on a roadside. So I come from that coolie family. So I wrote this poem about that whole identity of being the refugee. This poem is titled Refugee. It says, when I was born, my mother said, you are a refugee. Our tent on the roadside smoked in the snow. On your forehead, between your eyebrows, there is an R embossed, my teacher said. I scratched and scrubbed on my forehead. I found a brash of red paint. I am born refugee. I have 3 tongues. The one that sings is my mother tongue. The R on my forehead, between my English and Hindi, the Tibetan tongue reads, Rangzin. Freedom means Rangzin. So this constant search for identity, for meaning of life. When we were in school, we used to be told that we are refugees, and one day and eventually we all have to go back to our own country. And it was unsettling, completely shocking to suddenly get to know that I don't belong here. I don't belong to the country I'm born into, which we have always taken for granted that this is the country here and we are here. And suddenly, when you are told that you have to eventually go back to your own country, and you're not a citizen here, you don't own anything here, you cannot own anything here, and you have to go back to your own country, then everything, school, life, desk, house, room, everything becomes temporary. So we kind of systematize our mind. We tell ourselves that everything is temporary, everything is for now, and finally when we eventually get back to Tibet, when we set up our home, then we can set up our garden, keep some animals, and then we can make plans. Otherwise everything is accidental. So the refugee life, just the way, the mentality is such that everything is temporary and now and fine, so therefore idea of home is so very sacred, that home is something that you will set up only in Tibet, and because you attach so much of importance, sanctity to the whole idea of home, you don't want to set up anywhere. It's so very sacred for us. So therefore home is something that I carry all the time with me. It cannot be dropped as a seed anywhere. But there is a fear, because India has been so very generous to the Tibetans in giving us the refuge, giving us the freedom also to set up our own democratic government. You can, while in India you can travel, go anywhere. You actually feel very free. And some of the Tibetans have set up their own businesses. And because the Indian government has given us land for farming, have our own cows, grow our own fruits and vegetables, sometimes I feel that the poet feels that we may be kind of settling down here. There is a fear that we may never go back to our own country. There is a fear that real promise of home may not happen. So the poet writes this poem called Exile House. So in this, there is one Tibetan word used here, Tibetan word called Changma. Tibetan word Changma. Changma is actually a vegetative, very, very vegetative, and grows very fast. It's a plant, usually grown on the fences, and is flexible. It doesn't break when there's a huge wind. And even if you cut it down, it grows so very fast. So Changma, that is the idea of Changma. So that's used in this poem. The poem is titled Exile House. Our tiled roof dripped, and the four walls threatened to fall apart. But we were to go home soon. We grew papayas in front of our house, chilies in our garden, and changmas for our fences. Then pumpkins rolled down the cowshed thatch, calves trotted out of the manger, grass on the roof, beans sprouted and climbed down the vines, money plants crept in through the window. Our house seems to have grown roots. The fences have grown into a jungle. Now, how can I tell my children where we came from? So there is a constant fear that we may just settle down and never return home. That promise of home may never happen. So today in India, there are 100,000 Tibetans living as refugees. There are about 15,000 in Nepal, about 4,000 in Bhutan, about 25,000 Tibetans scattered all around the world. And in Czech Republic, we have 6 Tibetans. Yeah, 6. And he's the leader. Oh, Tashi. So this is the whole exile community. And in Dharamshala, which is the capital of Tibetan exiles, we have the government. There are a number of schools, hospitals, refugee camps in different parts of India. That is the thing. And besides the government, then there are Tibetan non-governmental organizations, number of organizations working in fields of social activities, education, in political campaign, and different others. And then there is also international Tibet support groups. So international Tibet support groups in almost about 65 different countries, and about 400 Tibet support groups internationally are functioning, working in coordination also. And once in every 3 years there is International Tibet Support Groups Conference. Earlier it had happened in Berlin, it had happened mostly in India. We do that kind of meeting, and this is the time when we all bring all the support groups together and have that conference, and then plan for next 3 years activities. This is how it functions. The government of India, the Tibetan government in exile, also has representatives in different parts of the world. So we have a representative, one in Paris, Brussels, Switzerland, UK, America, and in Taiwan, Japan, South Africa, and one in India, like that. So these are not ambassadors or consulars. Maybe in future they may become, but at the moment they are representatives of His Holiness and also of the exile government. So structurally, this is how the Tibetan struggle has been continuing. Now, in conclusion, let me say that Tibetans alone cannot bring a solution for Tibet. Of course, this is our struggle. It is Tibetan people's responsibility to bring a solution to this. But what had happened in Tibet is mainly because of Chinese invasion of Tibet. Otherwise, Tibet, like Nepal or Bhutan, could have remained an independent country. But China invaded Tibet, and therefore the situation has come to such a convoluted situation. And in order to bring change in China, as I said earlier, Chinese people themselves must bring a solution for the problem that they have in their own country. And I wish that the international community, instead of working with the Chinese dictators in maintaining tight control in China, they must engage with the Chinese people and help bring freedom. International communities have benefited from China enough. They must now take responsibility for their money. They must now take responsibility for their investments. And they have benefited from the suppression of Chinese people and the suffering of Tibet and other occupied countries like Uzbekistan and southern Mongolia. And this is the voice that I've been taking around, making people rethink their politics, their ways of thinking. There was a time earlier when the whole issue of Tibet was isolated. So we used to beg for support from the international community. But today, we do not do that. And at least my politics is to make the Western people responsible for the money that are benefiting from China and the investments that they're doing and the benefits they're reaping from trade with China. At least I make them realize that you have a responsibility. So therefore, problems in China today is not just Chinese people's problem. Problem of Tibet is not just Tibetan problem. It's part of globalization and part of international and global trade with China. So everybody has a responsibility and everybody's conscience must be moved. So I will end my small lecture here, and if there is any question, I'm happy to answer. And if there are comments you're making, we can discuss. Thank you.
Meeting is good.
They check. So
you can translate.
So would you like to summarize
Like
in Czech language
Maybe
if people didn't understand?
můžeme třeba udělat nějaký teď zhuštěný překlad nebo nějakou summarizaci, jestli by někdo
Zkusíme ještě nějaký ty otázky.
Já bych radši se věnovala taky otázkám, nebo je někdo, kdo jako
was not being influenced by Chinese propaganda. Of course there are, but most of the Tibetans have been maintaining resistance to Chinese propaganda, and therefore they've been able to maintain a sense of resistance from inside, and on the outside it may look that they are obedient, they are following the law, and they are not protesting. The difference is, for example, how the Cultural Revolution, the effects of Cultural Revolution. When Cultural Revolution came to Tibet, more than about 6,000 monasteries were destroyed. The monasteries that had been built over hundreds and hundreds of years were destroyed. The wood were used for burning. And in Tibet, because it's high topography, less vegetation, wood, especially in Western Tibet, is so very scarce. So what had happened in Tibet, Tibetans were shocked to see such systematic destruction of culture. And yet, even though they saw that kind of destruction to monasteries, traditional houses, cultures, singing, Tibetan food, they were made to embrace the revolution and made to feel that if you are not embracing the revolution, you are counter-revolutionary. So you can be interrogated publicly, you can be even shot to death in the public. So fear has overtaken. So what had happened? At that time there was no practice of Buddhism. At that time people cannot say prayers, people cannot sing, people cannot do any of the rituals that Tibetans always been doing and have always made that a daily practice of life. They cannot do any of those. And they cannot do that in China also. The difference is, Chinese, they accepted that as the change in their life and they became the revolution. Tibetans, outwardly, they may not be saying prayers, they may not be singing songs, they may be obedient and they may be part of the revolution, but deep inside they maintained the resistance. So therefore, in 1980s when there was the liberalization, when Tibetans could sing songs and say prayers, everything came back to normal. Now, many of the monasteries were rebuilt. People could say prayers. People could practice their own cultures. In China, there's nothing to come back. Because they embraced the revolution and they became the revolution. For them, that was the change. So now, many of the younger generation Chinese who want to go back to their Buddhist roots, there's no one to go back to. The older generation are dead. There's no one to receive teachings. So they come to Tibet to learn Buddhism from Tibetan masters. This is the difference. So there is definitely effective internal propaganda in Tibet also, but there is a difference how it was accepted by China, by the Chinese people, and the Tibetan among the Tibetans, because they maintained the resistance from deep inside, and outwardly they became they were doing as they are the part of the revolution.
But what about the young generation, the children at school? They don't hear anything about the history of Tibet, the truth. So, do they hear this from their parents or?
Interestingly, there are still number of Tibetan families, Tibetan parents who quietly speak to their children about the Dalai Lama, about Tibet's history, and there are also efforts from outside Tibet to send broadcast radio programs, to send in literature, to send in videos also. But these efforts permeating within Tibetan communities, little. It's not so much. And yet in 2008, when there was the biggest protest that spread across Tibet at the time of Beijing 2008 Olympics, some of the most active protesters were not elder generation Tibetans, they were younger generation Tibetans. They were the people who were at the age of 16, 17 and 20. And they've never seen the Cultural Revolution. So then we are asking, what moved them? Was history moved them? Was it history that moved them? Do you need to know your history in order to fight? We were asking ourselves, what happened? What inspired them? We were getting to know that this younger generation who are at the age of 16 to 20, these are the people who came out in the street and protested. They threw rocks at the Chinese police, and some of them even burned Chinese police offices. What moved them so much? We were getting to know that they could feel discrimination in their daily life. When they go to school, they are discriminated. When they go to college, they feel they are being disenfranchised. They feel they are second ranked population in their own country. They see this every day. So what inspires a revolution is not just history, but daily a sense of discrimination and the pride they want to have, which is not there. Their own identity. Interesting. How a revolution can be inspired not with the traditional idea of truth and justice and sense of identity and history. So but then in exile very often we keep on saying that Tibet was an independent country. We have all these facts and figures and we must tell the world. But then Pakistan had no history to show that that Pakistan was a historically independent country. Pakistan was created out of necessity, out of political necessity. And last year, South Sudan and North Sudan were again created out of political necessity. So, creation of an independent country, or recreation, or reclamation, needn't necessarily depend on a history. So here, when we look at the idea of a nation and the possibility of a revolution, it needn't necessarily be history. Because history of Tibet is something everybody around the world knows it. But who is doing anything? Everybody knows. Most importantly, United Kingdom, UK. UK was the friend of Tibet. They made treaties with Tibet. When they were fighting, when the British Empire was scared that the Russian Tsarists were making an influence with the Tibetans, they were fearing that the Russians were making influence and therefore they may be fighting. They may fight the British Empire from Tibet. They sent a military expedition into Tibet in 1904 led by Colonel Younghusband. And they found that there was nothing, that Tibetans didn't know even anything. They didn't even have proper guns with them. They were shocked. They had tea and they left. And that country who saw the independence of Tibet in 2008 announced that Tibet is a part of China. And if there is any shame, this is it. If there is any shame left in the world, this is it. You know, when I was growing up in school, my teachers used to say that the world doesn't know about Tibet. We must educate ourselves in English language. We must write and speak and tell the world the truth, and the world will support us. That idea of sense of justice was given to us, and I grew up with this inspiration because this was the most inspiring thing that made me leave behind all my children's game and study and educate myself, because I promised to myself at 5th standard that I will grow up to be a freedom fighter. I will write, I will speak, and I will challenge China with reasoning. But it didn't take much time to realize that everybody around the world have their own national economic interest, and nobody has any sense of justice. No one. So today, instead of asking for support in the Western countries, I say, take responsibility for your money. Because tomorrow, if you have to suffer because of your investments, because of your taking advantage of the dictatorship in China, at that time, then you cannot say you were innocent.
Maybe my question continues with this, because as you told that this is the point of business and some pressure coming from Western countries, but through Chinese business on Tibetans. Do Tibetan people have any idea how to do it? Because, just people like us, we try to say, our politicians, we don't want this. We want to behave honestly somehow, to keep in some what is right and what's not. But they don't care, and even the businessmen, they say, okay, but that's much cheaper, that's much easier. I want, I just want this money, of course. And even if there were some movements like to decide we will not buy any Chinese products, it's completely impossible, because you don't have much choice what you can wear or where you can live in, So you have any concrete idea how to step by step how to bring more people to another point of view?
Well, at the moment I've been speaking, I'm at a stage where I'm speaking only to the conscience.
Mm-hmm.
I live in India, I understand India's politics, I understand Indian mentality. So I work there. I have my own methodologies. I don't understand Czech economy, I don't understand Czech people, their mentality, their politics. Somebody who's living here like Tashi must design a way to tell Czech people how they could do things practically. So it's a responsibility for all the Tibetans living in all different countries, representing Tibet, to do things practically. Only when you understand the politics and mentality of people, then you can design a methodology. And I cannot, therefore, even by just standing here, I cannot give you any methods. You have to develop it yourself. I can only, speak to the conscience. In fact, I was not willing to come to the West because my duty is in India, and I should leave this duty to Tibetans living in all these different countries, in Germany, in UK, in France, and all that. They have their own duties that they must do. Any other question?
I just wanted to ask, when you travel across the world, Europe, perhaps the America, and these places all around the globe, and you meet communities in exile, the young generation of Tibetans, and when you observe their way of living, their way of thinking about cohabitation with the native people and global Tibetan issues and so on, do you see some change in their perception of these problems as the time goes, like you mentioned in your poem, the people with time, they just grow roots and they are more and more assimilated to the respective cultures and places. So, do you see these kind of things within the communities throughout the world?
Well, there's definitely change. Tibetans living in a number of these foreign countries, their first effort is to get residential permit, working permit, and then it naturally leads to citizenship. So it shows that they are serious about being there in all these countries. Which will then in the process make them understand truly the way the economy or the society functions in those countries. So that is the major change. In India, although my parents came from Tibet in 1959, or I born and brought up in India, they refused to take Indian citizenship. We maintain our identity as Tibetan refugees. We call ourselves refugees, though in India there's no refugee law. There's no one is officially, legally a refugee, because there's no refugee law there. You are either a foreigner or you are a citizen. So because we have applied for a Tibetan identity thing called registration certificate, which we have to renew every year, and that gives us the Tibetan identity. So all of us keep that. Which in itself is a mentality to say that I'm here temporarily, I'm not a citizen of India. While Tibetans in all other foreign countries, they work towards citizenship, which is a serious step for them to say that they are now going to be citizens of those countries and they will have rights on those countries. And on this trip, I've been asking every Tibetan, tomorrow when Tibet is free and independent, will you then leave the present citizenship and come back to Tibet? And tomorrow, if Tibet's future policy does not accept dual citizenship, will you still leave your present citizenship and come to Tibet and take the risk of, we don't know what nature of economy, what promises holds for future, citizens of Tibet. We don't know. Will you still be willing? So I've been asking. These are very serious questions, and perhaps they have not been asked such questions directly to them, but I've been asking these uneasy questions. And some of them said, "Oh, I never thought about it." But these are serious personal questions. What are you going to do? Will you continue? I mean, of course, every Tibetan, wherever they go, they will keep saying, "I am Tibetan," because culturally, mentally, they are Tibetan, and they will not change. Maybe after many generations, people may start to say, like, "I'm American and I've perhaps nothing to do with Tibet." I don't know. But most Tibetans, wherever they are, whatever citizenship they hold, whatever passport they hold, they continue to think that they are Tibetan, including their own foreign wives and mixed children. All of them start to say they are Tibetan. So there's definite change in it. What benefits in this? Perhaps the thing is, when they become citizens of those countries, they can then demand government action for Tibet, which otherwise, as a refugee, you can't. But if you are a citizen of that country, you can push your Senate members, your congressmen, your representatives to speak for Tibet. And if you have sizable number you could actually maybe later move a resolution also.
This is what happened with Dongdu Guangchen in Spain, for
Yes.
example.
Right.
The trial for cultural genocide,
Yes.
which is one actually.
Yeah, Tundu Wangchen in Switzerland. The case of Tundu Wangchen, support for Tundu Wangchen is from Switzerland. And what I couldn't get your name.
Michal.
What Mikhail is talking about is one Tibetan monk who is also Tibetan member of parliament living in Spain, Barcelona. He has been working for a case against, a legal court case against some former Chinese leaders and charging them for genocide and serious torture against political prisoners while they were there in Tibet. So he was taking this case, and the Spanish High Court earlier rejected but later accepted the case. And if this case continues, then these Chinese leaders who were running their governments in China and also in Tibet can be prosecuted, and if they travel outside China, they may be detained or even asked to appear in the court. But the Spanish government suddenly froze when the High Court accepted the case. So the government is now trying to put pressure on the High Court and say that we should not deal with such foreign cases. So anyway, there is an good example of how a Tibetan with foreign citizenship could actually do such a thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was really interesting.
I'm just amazed that you were born in India
Yes.
and brought up as a refugee. And how did you get such great English? Because in India, because I come from India, you must get into an English medium school, which is a convent school,
Yes.
and it's quite expensive. And I just didn't get the idea that you come from a rich background. Because in India, to go through, it's a very practical
Yes.
question, as you know.
Yes.
Because your English is perfect and good. So which means you had to go through the proper schooling. And coming with this, your background is a refugee background, which doesn't reflect in anything. So it's very good, like, this is a compliment, of course, but I'm just telling that how you managed to go to an English medium school, and because it's a very expensive, because most of the schools, 99% of the schools are actually, those times especially, are government supported, which are Hindi or English, Bengali mediums.
Which part of India do you belong to?
Calcutta.
Calcutta से हैं आप? अभी कहाँ रह रहे हैं? यही.
I travel. I'm a refugee myself, and I was born a refugee. I'll die a refugee because I don't believe in particular one religion, but I believe that Hinduism, as you say, that you are talking about temporary religion, and I believe that everyone has a temporary stay. We are here today, and tomorrow we are gone.
Philosophically, yes.
So
But everybody wants a home.
I don't. It's my philosophy, let's say. But I don't belong to any home, and I don't want to belong to any home, so I prefer not to have a home. But I have some here.
Do
and
you have a
wherever I
passport?
am.
Do you have a passport?
Yeah, I have to travel. Yes.
But do you have a passport?
Yes, I have to have a passport to
India's
do this
or other
revolution. Huh?
India's or other?
India.
India's.
So, and I have to have a passport to do the revolution.
Thank you. So the question is, how do you get this English? I think excellence is always inspired out of absolute necessity. And one's excellence is not because of resources. Excellence of any kind needn't necessarily because of certain available resources. Actually, resources, instead of giving excellence, create lethargy and laziness. Whenever we see rich people, we don't expect excellence. We just expect laziness. What happened in my case, right up to 12th standard, I didn't have English. I was worried that I'm now in class 12. And after BA, I need to work to speak for Tibet. And in 3 years, what am I going to get? This was my scare. Because in Tibetan refugee school, there's neither the excellence nor good English or anything like that. So I went to Madras. All my teachers were English, or Indians who were teaching English in our college, Loyola College. But the hard work I put in there, I think, was the one that made the difference. When all other Indian students in my class, when they were holidaying, when they were vacationing, when they were missing their parents and going home, I was in the college in the afternoons when our Jesuit Christian fathers were trying to take a rest. I go and wake them up and make them listen to my Tibet stories so that I get fluency in spoken English. At 4 o'clock, when all others are enjoying their afternoon teas or trying to go to the Marina Beach, I would sit and write and rewrite my essays, my stories, and go to my English teachers and show to them my new composition and get them corrected and write it again.
Great.
And there was a time when my Tibetan digestive system was not working, when it was burning because of idli, sambar and masala. There was a time I had peptic ulcer. I regurgitated, sour, burning saliva. I couldn't eat food properly. And I used to wet my pillow and put that to my stomach and keep reading Macbeth in the middle of the night. And while eating rice with sambar, I used to avoid this. Sambar is a very, very masala fight spicy food. I avoid that. I have curd and rice, idli and milk. I make such combination. So some of my friends, they laugh at me, but I ended up learning Tamil. I can speak Tamil.
Oh.
South Indian, which is considered a very difficult language. Even in India, it's considered a very difficult language.
Yes.
I picked up the language. I speak Tamil, and I have some of the, best friends in Tamil Nadu. In fact, this latest edition of my book, Kora, this is sponsored by my classmate who I studied with in 1993. All of them are now grown up. They have different, companies, and they're working everything. All of them put together money. They reprinted my 10th edition. This just came out recently. They put it together, their money, to reprint this. This is the bond I share with my Indian friends. So this is how, so therefore I was saying that excellence of any kind is inspired out of necessity and in the persuasion of that excellence. And resources have actually very little to do with.
Well, that's true, because in India, when we were doing freedom fighting, not me, but my ancestors, and I remember Gandhi, I was reading, Gandhi said naturally compassion and love and tolerance and this against the British for a long time, and but what brought the freedom to the Indians is by Subhash Chandra Bose. And you know how. So, and he sort of collaborated with the countries abroad, tried to make them understand their motives and how India could join hands with them, who were against that particular. So that's the UK. So I don't know. I'm not nobody to talk about the solution. But I just have this sort of, because we all always learn from history, and you are from India, so you know it more, or you would know it better. But I think, why don't you all think on that line? That as you say, resources is not really important. It's the mind and How, because you're fighting a cause. So, and if you really need freedom, and you are 6 millions plus for other countries, and you just have to talk to you have to understand the interest of the other governments and allure them with your resources. I don't know, I'm not supposed to be talking about that, but I'm just saying that you can allure them with your resources, and why China should take it, they can take it. I mean, I'm talking business now, but it is just, I think it's just an idea. I don't know. That because I always think about solution, how to solve, because all these words and what you are saying to the Westerners, do not take Chinese goods, it is a very, very long-term process. And it's very, very little people you see, like 4 or 5.
No, at the moment I did not say do not take Chinese food.
You're
I'm not
saying
going
that,
there.
but
I'm only speaking to the conscience of the people. Look, this is the situation.
But you see, people,
so they will find their own ways.
But people usually, it's always dependent on from the level of bureaucracy and this and that, and to their own interests. So it's just a question of how India, I'm just thinking from Indian perspective, when we got our freedom, how we involved other countries.
No,
and
one module of freedom struggle cannot be copied or
not copied.
replicated anywhere.
No, of course not, because we didn't have China as such as our sort of enemy. We had Britain, we had we had the UK. So it was, and also the Portuguese came and invaders were there. So we had another pattern. But I mean to say that I don't know. Gandhi failed there in one way for compassion and love and tolerance for a long time. Finally,
I'm just sorry to interrupt. I'm just like sort of jumping
I'm also spontaneous
because I just want to go back to the ideology because that I think plays like a big part because we had the experience of communism here, and right now we have something what is called post-communist syndrome, which means majority of people are behaving the way they learned in communism, and it's very against, like a civic society. And Tibet becomes like some sort of hotspot. So suddenly you have like different groups of people, and those who are pro-freedom are pro-Tibet, and the other way. And Zuzka, she knows, she could talk about ours. She's the best person, to explain the meaning of it currently. But what I want to just bring back in is that it's also the fight with the ideology, because when you fight with the communist ideology, even so there's this stage. The individual doesn't matter, your wish doesn't matter, the culture doesn't matter, and there's just so many things which became erased because of the ideology. So it's not like ethnicity like the Chinese and they're something against the Tibetan. It's also the ideology which is, sort of, doing the things what it does with various people, because there's also very strong Chinese descent, and people feel. So it's just the ideology, So that's why things are so complicated in the case of Tibet, I guess. I don't have an answer for it.
No, I also don't have an answer. I was thinking about
any other question?
I would like, it is just a personal, it's actually two questions. One, again, speaking about China, and you spoke about Liu Xiaobo and his wife. Are you personally, or did you any time talk to some Chinese dissidents, Chinese artists, Chinese people who work for Chinese democracy, and how? Staying in exile, we hear, like, even from the Ramsar here, yes, we have connections, we check the situation, we have different views from here and there, but is it alive? Some kind of meeting, person to person, speaking, talking, explaining the point of view, because sometimes when even official Tibetan exile, when they speak about the future, they are very unconcrete, and it's like, yes, the rights, people's rights, human rights, this, but the most important thing is to speak about concrete cases and discuss concrete situations. So the first question is if you are in co-work with people like this, and another question is who, personally for you, you can say 3 persons who are the most important persons now, maybe for Tibetan issue, or who you think will be important in next coming years? From, I don't know, exile community, Tibet, China, whatever.
But I think, firstly, yes, of course, I'm directly in communication with number of Chinese writers, artists. Some are living in exile, some are inside in China. I've seen also there is also this group of number of Chinese who otherwise would say democracy for China. And I've met some of them in Australia, in Taiwan, in the United States also. Some of them speak for democracy in China, but they wouldn't accept any idea of freedom for Tibet. You know, there are people like that. But what is potentially, or what is potentially going to be the more important voices of future China's democracy, I think most importantly is likely to be Liu Xiaobo. But I think at the moment, because everybody is kind of trading with China, but what is happening in China today is many of the corporate companies, large corporate companies, they are shifting out of China in different places. Not because they hate Chinese, most importantly because they cannot continue to make profitable business in China. Because the water in those areas have been exploited and polluted to such level that the water is no longer useful. The air is also polluted to such level. And also Chinese political awareness is rising. They are demanding more salary. So it's becoming unprofitable for them. They are now moving out to second most profitable countries, which are unfortunately India, Burma, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Thailand, and also Mexico and Brazil. So in this situation, I think Liu Xiaobo is potentially going to be the most important voice of future China, because he's been in the jail. And there may be a point of time where the United States will use Liu Xiaobo as main fulcrum of change in China. They will come to a point where the United States can no longer and will no longer be benefiting from China, but will have to face China. In fact, the hostility between the United States and China is already high. It's already high, and China is seeing in India, in Vietnam as competition, and therefore it has come to a situation where China is now insecure. So number of people are likely to claim stakes in future China, and Liu Xiaobo naturally, because he's in jail, clamor for his release is going to be an important political campaign around the world. But at the moment it's not, but in future it's likely to be important. So in that way, people who are related to Liu Xiaobo, people who are campaigning for him, and also, many of the Tiananmen Square heroes, many of them have kind of settled down, but some of them have been working. For example, Han Dongfang has been working for labor rights based in Hong Kong. Wu Kai-si has been working in Taiwan. Wang Dan is in Australia. And there are a number of these Chinese democracy activists in Germany, in United States, in Canada, in a number of countries. All of them are going to be playing important roles. I think that's the main reason how many of these governments have been sponsoring these Chinese democracy rights seekers. So we have been in touch, and some of them do say that as much as we want freedom for our country and Tibetan people, they must decide for themselves what kind of future they want. So that is the kind of common ground we come about. So we work together in that way. From the Tibetan community, I think the present Sikyong, Dr. Lobsang Sangye, is already playing a very important role, and he's been successful, most importantly, by capturing the imagination and therefore support of the people, especially from the younger generation Tibetans. We haven't had such a popular, loved Prime Minister before, because we always had someone who is respected and almost kind of feared, and he's so very popular, and therefore his popularity has actually become a strength. The new Tibetan Prime Minister at this moment cannot make major changes, but capturing everybody's imagination and maintaining a sense of a political agreement, and maintaining this fine balance between autonomy as a policy of the exiled government and also keeping a reserved voices for larger Tibetan population for independence of Tibet. I think this is a very fine balance that needed to be maintained, and I think he's doing quite well in this.
So, according to you, the future of Tibet, so if you can choose autonomy or independence?
Well, this, it's not a choice at all. I think how it has come about and how it's spoken to and how it is kind of interpreted to the Tibetan community, unfortunately, is so very wrong. It's true. It's no two different things. At the moment, even if all 6 million Tibetans rose up and are willing to die, Tibet is not going to be free at the moment. But look at the power of China, and it may even happen if we are so very confrontational now. It may happen in the way how Sri Lankan government cleaned up and completely persecuted the Sri Lankan Tamils. So at the moment, this is not a moment for confrontation. This is a moment to maintain their fine balance when a number of other factors must also come together to bring change in China, and then we could make that opportune, take the opportune moment. And for that, we need to survive first now. So therefore, maintaining autonomy as a policy of the exiled government, so that we do not suffer unnecessary pressures from all different countries, and especially from India. Because India and China have one China policy, one India policy. So that we do not come under unnecessary pressures from India, we have to maintain autonomy as our policy. And therefore, today if we do not have to suffer pressures from there, at least we can take advantage of whatever little opportunities there. For example, His Holiness's international travel is a huge benefit for us. And when we maintain autonomy as a policy, we can at least engage in some of the politicians, some of the congressmen, some of the Senate members in all different countries. These are little opportunities that we do not want to let go. So in order to maintain that, we are maintaining autonomy as a policy. At least this is my perspective. At the same time, the goal of ultimate independence of Tibet, of course, like all 197 countries, Tibetans also have absolute right to have Tibet as an independent country. Why not? If Czech can, why not Tibet? So this final goal of independence is the absolute and uncompromising goal of independence, and I don't want. And only independence of Tibet can truly guarantee the survival of Tibet as a country and Tibetans as a people. And this is the balance. This is the balance we are trying to strike. Unfortunately, some people have been saying, you want autonomy or independence. It's not a choice. It's just the balance we are maintaining.
Thank you. I have to go.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Apa naam kya hai?
Papia.
Papia. Acha. Bacha. Yesterday at the discussion we kept on talking about bata because we always thought bata is Indian product. And coming to Czech Republic here, I got to know that bata is Czech. It started from 1894. In India, we wear bata chappal, we wear bata shoes. We always thought it's Indians. We were very proud for it.
Anyway, Indians purchased this butter long time back as a country. But मैं यहाँ रहती हूँ, लेकिन मैं वहाँ का भी हूँ, यहाँ का भी हूँ. तो thank you very much.
I would like to ask, do you see any chance that in the near future the Chinese start?
One second, before we continue, I have a small business. If people are leaving, I have this book of poems that I'm selling. If people are interested, I'm selling for 10 euros. Yeah, so discussion can continue, but if you want, I have few copies here, and I'm selling for 10 euros. Yeah. Okay, so what were you asking?
Is there any chance in the near future, that the Chinese start to negotiate with, let's say, Tibetan exile government about the issues, about the Middle Way?
It depends which Chinese government. Yeah. If we are talking about this Chinese government who is continuing from Mao Zedong right up to Xi Jinping, I don't see this government has and will ever have any intention of doing any kind of negotiation with us, because the secret of power of this government lies in maintaining secrecy about Mao Zedong's establishment of People's Republic of China from that time up until today. So when it's continuing, and when their strength lies in that, this government will not talk to us at all. In fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our Prime Minister, has been saying that we are willing to talk anywhere, anytime, and they've just left behind the whole process of discussion from 2010, not been talking to us.
In Kazan any news nothing talk China.
He's saying that in the recent news, there was an expression of willingness to talk. But if you look at that, it said we are willing to talk only about the future of the Dalai Lama. So what's the point? The Dalai Lama himself says, this is not about me. He said, I am a very happy man. He said, I have no problem. He said, it's about Tibet and the Tibetan people. And China is saying it's about the Dalai Lama's future. Dalai Lama says, I have no problem. There's nothing to discuss.
I think if I may once more, the main problem here, when you see the news, when you see how the media and the government is presenting actually our cause, how the government is presenting what we are actually saying about the different issues, they often put things in our mouth like we are for the totally independent Tibet, and we actually want the separation for Tibet. They say we say this, and even doesn't matter.
One second, before you continue, let this be the last question, because I need to leave. I need to take train and go to Pardubice. And because tomorrow I'm going to Hungary. Yeah. Okay. Let this be the last question. Yeah. Okay.
Someone ever wants to?
So continue. Yeah. Continue.
Okay.
Jakou důležitou otázku ještě někdo? I think some more important questions.
I have one technical question.
You have a technical question. Yes.
Is it is it okay if I publish this on YouTube?
I have no issue. If you want, you can.
Yes.
I have no issue. I speak what I have in my heart. I say, and I'm willing to go and answer anywhere. I've appeared in many court cases in India, so I've become expert in answering questions.
Maybe we can have this optimistic note before you, because you know, for us, like when we had the Velvet Revolution, it was driven by people who were artists.
Yes.
That's why there was no blood, and Havel himself, he was
Yes.
a writer, and you know, things happened for us because of the support from the outside and because of people of letters. They were actually the driving force for all the dissent. So, you know, maybe that sounds like a good hope for things which you
Yes.
do, because it was sort of working for us.
Yes, writing, especially poetry, because poetry speaks into the conscience of the people, and it comes from the heart. Poetry, the whole process of composing a poem is to explore the finest language and contain the ultimate truth. And therefore writing poetry is so very difficult. And most people may have idea, but only few can write it. And few can understand also. Because not everybody has the capacity to understand poetry. Because poetry is the higher language of truth. And because of that, and not just poetry, all different arts, music, storytelling, theatre, now cinema, if it is truthfully done, it can open people's minds. Where it has been shut out of discrimination, hatred, anger, it can open up. So therefore we see that it is arts that connects internationally, not politics. So you're very right in truly recognizing where the power of communication lies. The power of communication lies in arts.
Just a very small question connecting with it. This, because when we speak about our former president Václav Havel, now in our political scene, it is heard that he was just a symbol, some, nothing really to do, only going here and there and speaking. And is it symbols? Is it important for you?
Yes, yes. It may be called a symbol, but in the most difficult time, you need someone who is willing to undergo the pain and the suffering. And just as Papia, she was saying that thing about Gandhi, I don't agree. We should have actually continued that discussion, because Gandhi was not just a symbol. Gandhi was the man who maintained the struggle from early 1900s right up to 1947. So someone who worked like that in firstly planting the idea of freedom, and then intellectually in creating a space of freedom in the mind of people who otherwise could not imagine a free India when the British Empire was so permeatingly, so spreading all across the world. It was not possible for Indians to think of a free India. It was not possible, because British Empire used to say that sun never sets on British Empire. The British Empire was so big. So compared to that, China is small. Much of Africa and much of Asia, including America and Canada and Australia, were part of British Empire. So how could Indians ever think that India is going to be free? And then Gandhiji came about and started to say, how can 60,000 Britishers rule 600 million Indians? He started to ask this question. And Indians started to think, really? There were only 60,000 Britishers, but they were still very powerful. They have guns, they have English, they have biscuits, they have law. So Indians didn't understand how. The Gandhiji said, the Britishers didn't come to India. The Indians wanted what the Britishers have. And therefore, Indians were so enamored by the British. Indians felt dependent. Indians have lost their own sense of identity and culture. They wanted to be like the Britishers. Indians wanted to learn English. Indian, more educated, more business-minded, more rich people, more what is called elite. They wanted to be like British, and they therefore not only invited but let them stay and let them rule over them. This is how Gandhiji intellectually made Indians understand how colonization works, and in India how it works. People started to understand. Then he said, Indianness is not in our face, it's not in our blood. Indianness is, liking, living your own culture. So, what are you doing wearing the British shirt? By wearing British shirt, will you be British? No. By speaking English, will you be British? No. Then why? What is that fascination for? Indians then started to understand, okay, let us make our, if British cloth is so very fine and that kind of textured, why can't we make our own? So they started to make their own shirts. They started to make their own cloth. They started to go back to their own practice of Ayurveda. So then slowly they started to reclaim independence, the freedom of their own country. But unfortunately, some of the aspects of colonialism remains in India. For example, police in India always thinks that they are the boss. They can beat anyone, number one. The law has become the biggest industry in India. India's biggest industry, and most torturous one, is not Tata and Birla. It's the legal system. Everywhere in India, the busiest place is the courts. Wherever there is a court, there's 100 people lining up and with carrying a paper, don't know what is it all about. They go and they pay the lawyers. So lawyers make most money, and people in India, they have been colonized by their own law. And this law is British. And English language education. English language education has become some of the most powerful people in India. In fact, only 5% of Indian population speak English. But this 5% of Indian population rule India. So Gandhi's idea of Swaraj, rule yourself, not rule by yourself, not power, rule yourself, rule your senses, rule your mind, run your mind, rule your mind, rule your senses, and then be free. Political independence, he said, is nothing. Just by kicking out Britishers from India, will India be free? If Britishness remained in India, what is the point? India said, if Britishers were willing to become Indians, come and stay in India. Is that even if 100 Britishers come to India, become Indians, we are happy to welcome, Gandhiji said. But if there is one British who is not willing to become Indian, even that one is extra. So this intellectually revolutionized how Indians started to look at British rule, and this liberated their minds. And practically, they said, how can the Britishers have the right to make salt, which is the basic sustenance of Indian food? Without food, there's no food. Without salt, there's no food. And how can they have the right to make salt and we not have nothing, when we are the native people of this country? Gandhiji said, let us break this law, and I'm willing to get beaten. I'll go to jail for it. And he did. This inspired millions of Indians. This is how he liberated. He said, if you want freedom, you have to have the freedom to get beaten. You have to have the freedom to go to jail. You have to have freedom to leave your family and go out. And that is the ultimate freedom. Because when you have freedom, you are willing to be in the rain. When you have freedom, you are willing to go into the darkness of the jails. And instead of feeling frustrated and desperate there, you enjoy that moment. Because that is the ultimate moment of freedom. Because you have gone out of your own security, out of your own desires of comfort. You have gone out. Then you are truly free. So I'm usually inspired by Gandhi, and I keep reading. And for me, and I usually say that the Dalai Lama's idea of compassion, it's too much for me, and I cannot understand that. So therefore, I usually say, I keep my Guru in my heart, and keep Gandhi in my head, and function from here. So this is how I work. So in India, usually I'm writing. I make my book like this and sell, but mostly I work as an activist, working with huge number of Tibetan youngsters, and I also go to Indian colleges, universities, many of Indian communities to speak about Tibet. And there, the idea is to say that Indians must work for their own security of their own country. And their future lies in independence of Tibet, not in China as their neighbor forever. And this is what they understand. So this is our work. And usually this is the bag that I carry. I live very simply, and I've won my own Rangzin. When we say Rangzin, is the independence. I have won my own Rangzin. And I usually go about with 2 shirts and 2 jeans and this bag. And this bag contains whatever that I need. So I'm a free man, like this. I've been working for the cause for a really, really long time, and I feed myself by selling copies of my book, like this. So anyway, I will now thank you. Yes.
Yesterday I have read an article in the internet about one man from Western country who was influenced by Gandhism. Man who is living without money, for example. Without money, it means without salary, without money, but he living is in the forest, and doing by himself, everything doing by himself, by his own hands and so on. But it is also different approach to it.
That's truly the idea of Swaraj, as Gandhi says. Idea of Swaraj, where you are not connected to physical form of money as such, but just the resources.
Yes. He is free from society,
Yes.
free from religion, I don't know, but free of money, of market and economy, free of policy and free man. But how in our modern society, how does he survive?
The lucky one. The call lucky. The system here is automatically.
But he doesn't know about it. But when he saw film about Gandhi, when he reads the biography and began to compare and so on.
Yeah.
Different approach.
These things can be happen in Asia, because Europe, the system automatically they put it into the money, and you have to pay monthly. But are you gonna work or not? It's like it's not easy to survive. It's like you walking around and become
Nobody should think that way to free yourself from money or anything. I would say it's just the maintenance that sense of balance. You do not, as long as you do not fall dependent and feel desperate to have so much of wealth, if you can maintain reasonably some resources to run the way you live, and not getting trapped in this constant building of resources, you can relatively win that kind of freedom, and living in that kind of freedom is possible in modern world. very often what happens is you have certain resources and then you keep on building on that, and you build up to such a level that you lose a sense of balance and you do not know what else do you need, and so it is no longer a need but a want, and there's no end in such kind of wants. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep it here. Thank you very much, Potala,
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
me here. We had some very good discussions.
Knížky se můžeme koupit a ještě vás poprosím, abyste tam, ti, co utekli, nevím, jestli tam něco dali, ale do kyblíčku.